The US failed to qualify for the Olympics for a third time in a row. In the all-important semifinal against Honduras, the US could not get it over the line and lost 2-1. So it seems I got the result right, but it went the other way than I predicted. I had predicted a 2-1 win for the US, but instead, of course, it was a 2-1 win for Honduras. But now, before we get into what are the root causes for this disaster, let's recap the game and some of the things that went wrong. Right from the beginning, I was surprised by the starting lineup, barring a few exceptions like Ochoa on goal, Vines at left back, Yule, Perea, Lewis, Ferreira. I expected all of them to start, but the center back pairing of Glad and Kessler and their positioning as well was a bit of a surprise. I mean, Glad up until this point showed he played best as the left-sided center back, and personally, I would have gone with Pineda as his partner, as he did well there against Mexico. Or even Kessler. I mean, he showed that he also played better on the right side, just like in the Dominican Republic game. So it was strange that they kind of switched positions. But I mean, they weren't terrible, actually, quite frankly. They, weren't responsible for the loss, but I still think a better center back pairing could have done better. And on right back, Herrera started. And honestly, I was expecting Araujo. Yes, he did struggle a bit against Mexico, but so did Herrera. And they honestly played the same amount of minutes, so they were both equally tired. So I'm honestly not sure why he got the start ahead of Araujo. The other surprise was that Dotson and Mihailovic started. Now, it's not surprising in the fact that they played at all because I was expecting them to play, but I was hoping that they would come on, or in fact, feel like they would be better utilized as impact subs. Instead, they started, and Dotson especially did not play very well. It does seem like that was mostly down due to an ankle injury, but even then, why would you start a player who was suffering through that type of injury? But for better or worse, and mostly for worse, that was the starting lineup. And how did this team do? Well, the first half was largely uneventful. Not too meaningful chances from either team. Honduras' shots were at least on target, though they were from distance and pretty comfortable saves for Ochoa. However, our few shots weren't even on target. In fact, two of them from Lewis went way over the bar. So the defense was pretty solid, but once again, the same old problems the US had in the group stage showed up once again. Heavy touches, a complete inability to control the ball, and the same bad passing. For example, here, Mihailovic gets the ball in the middle of the field. Immediately gets put under pressure, but he does do an excellent job of getting out of that tight space and sees Jesus making a good run. But what happens? He puts the ball too far, and Jesus can't get to it since it was a very hard pass and put too far for him. Really has been the story for the whole tournament. The wingers always did a good job of getting through, getting themselves into the final third, but that final pass, that final touch was always lacking, and it especially showed here in this game. Later on, again, this time Jesus gets the ball, and he's in a good position to spring the counterattack, but once again puts a bad pass to Lewis and straight to the opposition. Now, there were some good moments, like when Honduras was playing out from the back, and the US pressed effectively as a team and forced Honduras backwards, and they had to clear the ball, which led to a turnover. Now, this was good, but the US just didn't do this enough. In fact, they rarely press Honduras' defenders effectively. The US was also very slow to build up attacks, and that allowed Honduras to get back, get in good defensive shape, which the US then would struggle to break down. And that is exactly how it played out up until deep in stoppage time for the first half, when Honduras gets the ball back from a US clear. Now, this is important here because it's a key factor that leads to their first goal. This Honduras player is able to control the ball with his first touch. This is something that the US had failed to do time and time again. Bad first touch, unable to control the ball. Now, why is that so important? This is why. Because this player, because he's able to control the ball so quickly, he is then able to quickly put the ball back in a dangerous position before the US players are able to react. Honduras does a good job here, passes the ball from a header to an open player, and goal. And now, because this is happening so fast, that ball came in so quickly, the player Obregon is really not able to get good contact with the ball. And Ochoa also does his best to react, but he's just not unable to get that ball under control and bounces off of him and goes in. So now the US is down right before halftime. Obviously, a huge blow to morale, but now the question is, how will they respond? What changes will Christ make for the second half? Will he sub out Lewis, who was simply not playing well? Maybe sub out Dotson, who was largely ineffective, though again, possibly due down to that injury, but he still wasn't 100% and wasn't impacting the game at all. Does he bring on Cardoso or Tessman to help out that midfield? Or bring on another attacker like Soto to push for that equalizer? In fact, many were thinking that he could have switched to an even like switch formation to a maybe more attacking 3-5-2. But out of all these options, what does he do? He takes off Mihailovic and brings on Salcedo. What? This made little sense, as Mihailovic was honestly one of the better players on the field up until that point. Sure, that wasn't saying much because, in fact, no one was playing particularly well, but there were at least two other players that needed to be subbed off before him. And Salcedo, I mean, he showed that he's pretty much on the same level as Lewis, and he isn't really a goal scorer, so why would you bring him on when you're trying to find an equalizer? That was the change he made, and the U.S. started the second half, honestly seeming quite apprehensive, far from pressing and attacking Honduras. In fact, they seemed a little unsure of themselves or even what to do. Now, yes, this team was not used to trying to come back from behind, but still, this was the exact opposite response than was needed. Now, as much as that seems to be on the players, personally, I'll also put this on the coaching staff for clearly not communicating effectively the plan, failing to calm his players down, and instilling the needed motivation and confidence to stage a comeback. Apart from, again, failing to make the necessary changes. Soon after, right in the beginning of the second half, what happens? Well, Herrera receives the ball deep in his own half and was under some slight pressure from Palma, the Honduras player, but honestly, he had plenty of help right in front of him, plenty of U.S. defenders to pass to, but instead of passing to any one of them, he instead decided to pass it back to Ochoa. Now, this on its own isn't necessarily a terrible choice, but in this case, it would certainly prove to be, making it all that much worse that he had other options to pass to instead. And now Ochoa here is being pressured by Palma, but he still had plenty of options to pass it to, but instead did make a rather baffling choice to try to pass it back to Herrera, where Palma was directly blocking. And so he easily intercepts and it bounces back in for a goal. Now, despite this being a genuine and big mistake by Ochoa, honestly, I refuse to berate him or make it seem like he is a terrible player because honestly, far from it. In fact, he proved to be one of, if not the best player in this entire roster. So it just feels especially cruel that it was him to make this fatal mistake. But that's football sometimes. That said, and despite being down 2 goals, it was the 47th minute. So the US still had plenty of time to make a comeback. And finally, the US did start playing faster and with some urgency. But that did open them up a bit to Honduras, and they almost took advantage of that. Almost got a third goal, but it was just wide. And things weren't looking very good up until the 52nd minute when Jackson Ewell scored an absolute golazo from outside the box. This was kind of out of nowhere, but was very important because it gave the US something to hang on to and could have been a potential turning point for them. But while this did seem to galvanize the team a bit, the same old poor passing kept it from leading to anything more. Then at the 62nd minute, we got another sub, Soto on for Perea. And as was the case with most of Cree's changes in this game, they were too late. Soto should have been on the field way sooner. And Dotson honestly should have been taken off much sooner than he was, which is the next change at the 73rd minute when Tessman was finally brought on. But soon after that first change, the US did have another chance. From a free kick, Ferreira set up Lewis, who did get a header off, but it was straight to a defender who knocked it away. There was another chance from a free kick just outside the box. Yule got a good shot around the wall of the defenders, and it was heading to that bottom left corner, but the Honduras goalkeeper was equal to it. Then, when Tessman came on the 72nd minute, as mentioned before, honestly, it was much too late because, I mean, he did still have enough time to try to impact the game, and he really did. Because just around the 83rd minute, when he gets the ball wide on the left side, he manages to get by two defenders very well, gets in a superb cross. Absolute perfect. It finds Lewis completely open right in front of goal. But what happens? He mishits it. I don't know if he panicked, overthought it, or what, but instead of tapping it in with his left foot as one should in that position, he instead decided to try and hit it on the outside of his right foot and ends up hitting the ball backwards somehow. How he messed that one up, I'll never know. But that was by far the best and biggest chance the US had in the second half, and probably in the whole game, and it was totally blown. A little later, Jesus had the ball and space. He has Herrera to his right wide open and with space as well, but he decided to take a shot and put it wide. And for the next few vital minutes, the US couldn't really create anything more, and instead was doing quite a bit of defending from Honduras, who looked like they really wanted to put this one away for good, but they were just unable to. But this did keep the US in its own half instead of pushing forward when they needed to the most. Then finally, at the 89th minute, Lewis comes off for Cardoso. Honestly, what was the thinking behind this one? I don't know. I don't think Christ knew what to do at all. And the fact that he had one sub left that went completely unused shows this as well. He made the changes, the wrong changes, and he made them way too late. Complete tactical failure from Kreese. Then, right before the 90th minute, another chance. This time it's Herrera out wide, crosses it in, looking for Soto, who does try his best to get to it, but ends up being thwarted by some excellent defending by Maldonado, the captain. And Tessman was also key in the build-up to this chance. He actually played it quite well and had good passing, which the US was thoroughly lacking throughout the whole game, which just makes me think what could have been if he had come on for Dotson at halftime like he should have. Then there was 5 minutes of extra time added, which did give the US hope for an equalizer. But they didn't do much with these last few minutes. They did get another corner, the dying moments of the game. Cardoso is wide open, but hits it wrong and it goes out wide. Then finally, 30 seconds left on the clock. The US has possession, but instead of trying to pass and build up to the final third for one last chance, instead they just thump it forward with no real target, ends up in the hands of the keeper who runs out the clock. And with that, the game and the US Olympic hopes end. I'm splitting this video into two parts, and the next one I will go in detail about what are some of the root causes of this failure, where the blame should lie, and what can be done to avoid this happening again. Now, many are saying that this isn't a result of any systemic issues with the US soccer program, and instead is just a result of these players simply not being good enough. Personally, I disagree with that narrative. And even though there were subpar performances for sure all around in this roster, I still lay most of the blame on head coach Jason Kreis. And as a result of that, I won't go too much into individual player performances for this game. I will briefly mention a few, not just for this game, but for the tournament as a whole. First off, for me, the best player is still David Ochoa. He made at least 18 saves this entire tournament, which is incredible. He put in a strong performance regardless of that last fatal mistake. I expect him to bounce back from this, come back stronger, better than ever, and should still be in the discussions for regarding goalkeepers in the senior team. Him, I think Buell probably put in an overall good performance. I mean, he did score 2 goals, and honestly, in this last game, he played with the most heart and was the one trying to motivate the team and looking for that equalizer. Dotson as well did surprise me a bit in the tournament as a whole. He played better than I honestly expected, but his overall performance in the tournament was more of a mixed bag. But honestly, that goes for most of the players in this roster. Their performances range from poor to decent and was mostly a mix of the two. Tessman, in the limited minutes he played all tournament, mostly did play well. I'd like to see more of him, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays in the upcoming MLS season. Cardoso was surprisingly poor, and I really can't explain why. He definitely has the quality. I mean, this tournament, poor tournament performance doesn't really change that. He is one of the younger players in the squad. I mean, him alongside Tessman, Araujo, and Ochoa will still be eligible for the next Olympic cycle in 3 years. Honestly, I do expect him to continue improving until then. Soto was another one that surprised me by how poor he was in the tournament. But when I analyze his performance, it does seem mostly to be down to the system rather than him. If you look back at all the game time he had when he was on the field, if you watch him off the ball, he mostly makes some good runs, gets himself in good positions to receive the ball. He just never got the service he needed to finish. And it's clear that Crease's plan A, as far as the strikers was concerned, was using them as a false nine. He built his system with that in mind. And there really wasn't much of a plan B, and that showed, especially when it came to Soto. But I will go more in depth into that in part two Because as I said, I think most of the negative aspects of this team and the performance are down to his tactical failures and decisions. Even some of the players' poor performances, I think, are down to his system and his tactics. So be on the lookout for part 2 of this video where I will get into all of that. Until then, let me know your thoughts about this failure to qualify, the US's poor tournament performance as a whole. Let me know down below. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. This is American Soccer United, the place where American soccer fans unite.